It is the pink elephant theory. If the guest wants a pink elephant, get them a pink elephant. If you can't find a pink elephant, get a horse, paint it pink, convince the guest it's an elephant. Do whatever it takes to ensure they're happy. That's it. Are they happy? We are back. Chris Adams here with you on the Pink Elephant. And, you know, it's a special week this week as I have an old friend. I tell you, this guy, when you hear the stories he has from around the globe, it's going to be a fun few minutes that we get to hang out together. Chef Reiner is with us, the principal founder of HKB-Designs. Man, good to see you.
Good to see you, man. It's a pleasure, and thanks for having me.
You know, we've known each other for a while. We've worked together for many years, and ironically enough, our paths continue to stay intertwined throughout the years.
That's what happens when you're, groomed and grown in the Ritz Carlton world, like we were. And it's funny that a lot of my connections made over the years with Ritz Carlton are yielding success today in business, right? Because you stay connected, and there's a certain philosophy that sort of kept us all in the same direction. So it's good to see, right?
I know. And, it's crazy because even to this day, I could tell you, my company, I know yours is the same. There's so much of those principles that were ingrained in me as a kid that I still live by and believe to my core to this day. So it's interesting to see how that doesn't leave you.
No, it does. And I think, it always took everybody about a year to understand the message and the true philosophy behind it. And it took a year for everybody to understand that it actually works and there's a reason and purpose to it. And the first thing I did when I set up my company, I said, so what's our mission and what's our vision?
Yeah.
And that's something that's like, if you talk to other people who set up companies, they're like, what are you talking about? So I do this. And I said, well, that's maybe not enough. You gotta have a greater purpose in life than just, making omelets or something.
Literally had my Credo card. I had my Credo card out, I think, in the early days of EAG, trying to figure out what's my Credo card going to look like.
Yeah.
Talking about that, and obviously Ritz Carlton, we have a connection there, and we'll get into that. But if you can give a snapshot to those that are listening or watching of, your career has been, it's incredible knowing your background and everything you've been able to do and accomplish. If you can give I know that'll be tough, but a snapshot of kind of how did you get to where we are today?
Snapshot is tough, correct. 43 years in the 20 seconds, right? So born and raised in Germany, grown up in a pub. My parents had a pub, what you would call a gastropub today, over here, making schnitzels and frikadellen, which is a little like a hamburger patty type thing. And growing up there, pouring beers at 12 years old, right? Pre-positioned a little bit here. Cook apprenticeship in Germany, and then packed my bags and left, and started off in Frankfurt at the Intercontinental, moved to London to an Intercontinental, moved to a 3-Michelin star restaurant in London. Just kept trying to improve and grow my career exponentially each time with each move, right? And always stayed in the luxury area, never veered off the luxury, be it hotel or be it restaurant, right? So Michelin star restaurant or 5-star deluxe hotel. And subsequently, I figured out that hotels is probably what I prefer over restaurants, and stayed in hotels, and then moved to America, did a quick stint in Chicago at the Drake, and then moved over to Asia and started at the Kowloon Shangri-La as a chef de cuisine for a French restaurant, and then really trying to, just figuring out what can I learn, how can I learn more, and with that kept moving through different places in Asia, subsequently becoming executive chef at the opening of Sheraton Grand Sukhumvit, a new brand at the time. I wanted to be established as their luxury segment. brand, and then moved to Mandarin Oriental Kuala Lumpur, executive chef, followed in Singapore, and then by accident ended up in Cancun, um, executive chef, food and beverage director up in Toronto at the Ritz Carlton, and then corporate chef globally, Ritz Carlton for 6 years, and then 4.5 years of Marriott Luxury Brands globally, VP Culinary, overseeing strategy, new build, design, development, all that fun stuff, right? So really taking um, the idea of operations to the development side and making sure that whatever was being built made sense in an ops perspective, right? Which helps me today, which then transitioned into my own business. And I'd say, okay, what am I good at? What do I like to do? Um, and where can I add value to the conversation? And all what we do is really stuff that I did in my corporate role, I did previously, and I think I can add perspective or value to a potential client, right?
Well, I think that's been proven, right? I mean, you since you
Yeah,
stepped
yeah,
away and
it's been
launched your own
proven.
thing, I mean, you've blown up, and so obviously the value that you're adding is there. Um, I mean, that transition from being
But I think what's interesting, what I find interesting after speaking to different people is a lot of people don't take the time and crystallize the vision and mission, and then crystallize what are they good at, what where they add value, and understand truly where they can add value,
yeah,
and that they play all over the place, or they play all over the try to play in many, many different fields, and really ultimately the goal is to just do what you're good at, right? Just don't pretend you're good at everything. Do what you're good at, add value to where you can, and eventually people will recognize the fact that you add value to them or to their organization or to their project or to their whatever, right? So I think that's really where the success is compounding, and it's growing in leaps and bounds, which is good to see, right? And now it's word of mouth versus me chasing potential clients, right? So it's
yeah,
like somebody saying, "Hey, can you do this? Can you do that?" Right? So, but it's all cumulative, right? If you look at my career path, everything has been a result of what I did before.
yeah,
I got a job because I did another job. I got a better job because I did another, and I've always stayed focused on, the old Ritz Carlton Horst Schulze thing, staying within excellence, right? Do your stuff as good as you can, and be honest and open and transparent about it, and say no if you can't, or hey, I don't know, it's okay, right? And a lot of people don't do that, right? I think that's where some of the value it lies as well, right? So
yeah. Just focus on being great. Don't try and be everything to
deliver excellence, deliver excellence, get up every day and try to deliver excellence, and try to deliver it a little bit better than you did yesterday.
How was the transition? It's easy. I think it's easy now as your company has found just, immense success doing this. But the
Yeah.
transition from leaving something that you knew as well, if not better than anyone, a brand that I think all of us deeply care about, the transition from that to doing your own thing. How difficult was that for you?
I don't, in the beginning, because of the situation, it was forced, right? Because it was COVID. The company offered early retirement packages or early uh, exit packages, and I sort of said, you know what, there is probably less focus on my area of expertise within the organization moving forward over the next couple of years. Maybe I should just walk away and retire. And financially, we're in a position to do so, etc. And then after about 3 days, my wife said, "You're going to drive me crazy. It's not a good idea. Go to your little office and figure out what you want to do." So it was never really it was a shock for a moment that you wanted to retire and get your head around that. But at the same time, I always knew there's going to be a moment where all of this will have to stop, right? So by no means, I think it just forced me to think it through quicker than I would have done otherwise.
Sure.
It probably accelerated my thought process by 2 years. And then once having the benefit of being in a financial situation that you don't have to worry about your next paycheck, gave me a certain cushion, a certain tranquility, a certain, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
just, it didn't put any pressure on me to be successful or to do it tomorrow. Although I did it tomorrow. I launched I think my last official day was the 14th of August, and HKB was launched on the 22nd of August. So, but because I had 3 or 4 months previously, time to think, put a website together, put my thoughts on paper, crystallize what I think I'm good at. So I took those COVID times and really made good use of that time to think.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it wasn't ever scary in any shape or form. And the network that I have been able to build over the last 10 years prior truly helped me getting very, very quickly job offers of different types of gigs, right? And so it wasn't really a big sort of move on, like impact, whatever. It was almost like, hey, let's try this. If it works, cool. If it doesn't, I drink more tequila and it's all good, right? So it doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah.
And that's a fortunate and unique position to be in, right? One has to realize that, right? It's not common.
No, it's
to
not.
be at
And
that
I think
level.
it's interesting too, because, you stepped away, like you just said, at that time. And I remember we were on a lot of calls together at that time trying to figure out what's the next move.
Yeah.
And
Right.
everyone assumed, the assumption was, okay, the luxury segment's going to crash and burn coming out of this. Oh my God, shut the world down in luxury.
Well,
And
I
I think the exact opposite is actually what's taken place.
actually, I was on a podcast right early into COVID, and I said my projections and my predictions at that podcast, and everything I said 2 months into the pandemic came true, right? And I said luxury will be the first segment back, and because the guy or the girl that has $1 billion in the bank might lose 200 million. They still have 800 million in the bank. They're not going to change their behavior or their pattern or their dislike or like for something.
Yeah.
They still want to go away. And you saw that immediately. Mexico opened up right away, right? They said, okay, that's the only country people could go and hang out on the beach with some restrictions, but it was sold out, right? And rates were going through the roof. And everything that for the hotel industry, the restaurant industry, different conversation, right? Was a lot more complicated in the restaurant side of the business, right? But in the hotel side of the business, everything that I said came through. And the other thing I said was that in the COVID, just like in any other historical situation, it will be a V shape. It will be a V shape. And it might be 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, 10 months, who knows, right? Nobody knew. But it will be a V shape. And what did we see, right? We're seeing more than a V shape. We're seeing a straight curve up, right? So development slowed down a little bit. Yeah, that's okay. But it's always slowed down. At the financial crisis in Asia in 96, 95, 96, 97, swine flu, 9/11. I think 9/11 was the one that took a lot longer to recover because there was a little bit more fear on a long-term perspective, right?
More uncertainty for sure.
Because it's affecting everybody. So I think that was it was interesting, and it still is interesting.
Yeah,
that
and
people didn't listen.
I tell you, living in that that segment of luxury, it's been very interesting, one, to see it bounce back how it has, but also to see how it is continuing to evolve and shift because
Sure.
the going into labor, right? We talk about the labor market and the fact that it is a different world now. The labor models that we have at these hotels is not even remotely close to when I was on property. Yet the expectations is probably higher than they've ever been before. So it's been very
Much higher.
interesting on
Yeah,
our
much higher.
side, and I know for yours as well, to say how do we deliver an even more incredible experience for the guest, for the consumer, with less people to do it, that have less training that's been put in place. They have their backgrounds of how they were raised in the industry is not the same as it was when we were on property. They're getting thrown into positions way earlier than we typically would recommend. Yet we still have to deliver at a high
Mm.
level. It is an interesting time to say the least. At least that's what I'm seeing.
No, and I think, this is something that has been coming for a long time, and
Mhm.
particularly in the Western world, right? There are still countries in the Eastern Asia, etc., Middle East, where labor is less of a conversation,
Yeah.
right? Um, if you look at the Western world, however, labor has been a conversation for the last 10, 15 years. And I, in my previous role, when I spoke to the culinarians, I would encourage the culinarians at the time and say, guys, you gotta get ready to change your chip. You gotta get ready to change your approach and embrace food technology, food manufacturing, and equipment technology to help you where it makes the most impact on quality or cost or time of delivery or skill level, right? And fortunately, we are living in a time today where both technology has tremendously improved. Um, Food manufacturing, quality of food manufacturing has tremendously improved. And you just need to sit down and become even more of a business person in your approach and think this stuff through, right? And what we're seeing, I think, is the people who do this really well continue to be successful. And the people who are not doing this very well fall off the bandwagon, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things that we're working through on our side, to piggyback on what you're saying, is the fact that when I look at and I'm talking to executives, whether it's at Marriott or one of the other big brands out there, and they start looking at their markets and they go, hey, how come in the Americas we're not performing like we are in Asia? And I go, "Well, guys, I mean, we're not really comparing apples to apples here." And so, but for a lot of them, it's merely they're looking at scores, right? They're pulling out numbers and they go, "These numbers
Yeah, yeah. They're looking at a number.
be
Yeah.
better." And you're like, "Well, I hear you, but I think if we don't change the approach of how we execute here, you're never going to get those type of results because you're not comparing apples to apples. It's not the same business model."
And it's never been, and by the way, it's
Yeah.
never been, right? It hasn't been. I mean, I worked in Asia 13 years. This, I think, is sort of give you a little indication, right? So I left opening the Fullerton Hotel with the latest technology in food production, displays, buffets, blah, 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 right? And then I came to Mexico and I walked in there and like, what is this? This is like straight from the 80s, right? Or straight from the 70s. Because nobody ever challenged or nobody ever updated and nobody ever looked at technology and stuff like this, right? So I just came back from a project in Punta Cana looking at a big installation there, and it's like being back in the 80s, right? No, nobody, well, we're having all these problems. I said, yeah, yeah, you're having all these problems because your team doesn't even get a chance to deliver because the tools that they have aren't adequate for the job any longer. It's outgrown itself, right? And I think that's the challenge. People don't understand that. Like you said, they look at the scorecard and they say, hey, Abu Dhabi is delivering this. Or they say, yeah, well, in Abu Dhabi, I can If I need 200 more people, I make a phone call, and in a week I have 200 more people.
Yeah, it's a different world.
As simple as
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Um,
and
I want to transition really quick because we were on a project together recently, and it's one that interesting project slash it was just different outside the box altogether.
unique,
Yeah, it's a great way. It's
unique,
unique. And I'm talking about the Ritz Carlton yacht. Um,
very unique.
it was, coming from Ritz Carlton and still bleeding cobalt blue, and then walking into that, which is you're trying to recreate the Ritz Carlton
Yeah,
feeling um, on a yacht, and doing it in a way
on
that
water.
it was very it was very different than I anticipated. And I
Mhm.
think those are things we're still, I think, still working through to figure out how do we translate what we
Yeah.
do on land onto the yacht. How you've been a part of that project for even longer than I. How has that been?
8 years. Yeah, 8 years, right? So I was there at the original kickoff meeting, and I think throughout the years, been part of many discussions. What can be done? What can't be done? How is it translating to the the water, so to speak, and how does that work, right? And really, I think the philosophy translates, as we know, everywhere, right? The credo, the philosophy, etc. Everything translates no matter where you go in the world. You just have to have a system in place that won't accept that it's not being lived, right? And if you guarantee that, ultimately you will find success, because the credo and the mission and this vision is so strong that it will translate to this. The uniqueness of this particular project is in logistics, both in procurement as well as in labor. Although you can get labor, you can't get more labor than you have beds.
Yeah. Well, the other thing with labor that was interesting for me, and you said this at the beginning of this conversation, you said typically with Ritz Carlton, it was about a year, and then people was like, okay, it clicks.
Yeah.
Well, when you look at in that world, it's constantly changing. They sign these contracts for X a months at a time, and then they're off onto the next thing. So you're trying to shrink
The
the
audit,
window.
yeah. So the goal here, I think, is from a strategic perspective, is how do you make sure as many of the ladies and gentlemen that are on contracts come back on a new contract,
Yeah.
right? And the more you can guarantee that, and the more you can pepper your leadership with seasoned Ritz-Carlton leaders, um, and make sure they come back, in the long run, this will develop into a philosophy stronghold that will be delivered, right? And I think right now, just one ship is a little bit of a challenge, but next year with the second ship, and then subsequently a year later, a third ship, you have enough bench strength that moves between ships. It will create its own culture base that will allow to continue to deliver that philosophy, that Ritz-Carlton service and stuff like that. But and I believe that the Ritz-Carlton Yacht team, the Marriott, the Ritz-Carlton Leadership Center, everybody is extremely zoomed in on the fact that the hiring process, the rehiring, the continuity of the philosophy, and having people that know the philosophy are hugely important to the success of delivering a Ritz-Carlton experience to the guests. And I think the good thing is that, like any new hotel, also, the scores in the beginning are peaks and valleys, right? That's pretty typical, because any operation that you open needs time to settle, um, and establish itself.
Yeah.
And the good news on the Ritz-Carlton Yacht is that now, what are we, 8, 9 months in? I think 9 months into this thing, the scores have settled. They're steadier, and they're increasing,
Yeah.
right? So, and that's really kudos to the team to make sure to continue to push um, the service values, standards,
Yeah.
the product quality, and stuff like that. And people ask me, well, how do you ensure the supply? I said the biggest problem is supply of ingredients, right? That's the biggest problem because you don't know what guests will order.
Yeah.
But you're not like a cruise ship like Norwegian here in Miami. I'm in Miami currently, and they come in, they load up, they go out for 6 days, they come back in. This thing is moving from A to B to C to D to E to F to
Yeah.
G, right? It continuously does this. And so how do you anticipate when you're running out of steaks?
Yeah.
And where do they need to be delivered? And how many do you need to have delivered
Well,
at
and then the
that port?
quality and are you getting the same quality at each
Yeah.
port? And yeah. Yeah.
So I think that logistic piece is the biggest piece to figure out for them, besides the labor piece. And I think they're getting better and better and better because it's a learning, right?
Yeah.
So
It is great to
and
see that so much focus is being put on the culture side because you and I both know Ritz Carlton works as a brand because of the culture. When
the only thing
That's it.
that distinguishes that's the only thing that the building is a building. The logo is a logo. Many of the senior leaders that I've worked with and for in my 20 years with Ritz Carlton always said the same thing. Everybody has a great building. Everybody has the latest amenity. Everybody has the greatest designer involved into that project. Everybody does. How do you establish a culture of delivering? So we go back to what is luxury, right? I think you and I talked about what is luxury. And how do you define luxury? Because the word luxury has been stretched.
God.
In every industry, this word has been stretched, right? But if you go back to what it really means, it means deliver something that you can't get everywhere else, right? And so a bottle of water I can get everywhere. But the experience, how the bottle of water is delivered to me by a friendly, genuine smile is what sets me apart, right? The functionality needs to happen no matter what. What is rare, because by definition, luxury means rare, hard to obtain, expensive, right?
Yeah.
There's all these qualifications of what luxury means. And I think the biggest luxury in today's world is service. But genuine service, looking at the guest, understanding what the guest likes, does not like, wants, when he wants it, she wants it, etc., etc., etc. And if you can deliver,
Yeah, we always say for me, my interpretation is the best way to help people understand is luxury is a feeling. Luxury is a feeling you're able to give because, like you just said, getting the bottle of water, anyone can do that. How that guest feels when they get the bottle of water, that determines luxury or not.
Yeah, so go from what I always used to tell everybody in the organization that I spoke to is, how do we get from transactional to experiential?
Yeah.
How do you take a burger, speaking as a chef, how do you take a burger from transactional to experiential? Now, in experiential, you still have to deliver the first part, right? The transaction. You still have to deliver, I order a burger medium, I order it with jack cheese, and I order it with whatever, salad and no fries, whatever it is, right? So I still got to get the elements of the transactional right, because if I don't deliver the burger the way you want it cooked, I don't deliver it with the side order that you want or whatever, right? So now you got to sit yourself down and say, okay, so now I've got that right. How do I take it to experiential?
Yeah.
What can I do, right? Can I make my own ketchup? Can I tell a story around the patty? Can I tell a story around, and storytelling is obviously a big part of all of this, because today's world that materialistically people can afford anything. It's about experiences and storytelling.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. What
And
do
if you
you
can do that,
what do you think is what's the next evolution of we can't continue doing what we've always done. We know things are going to continue to progress, change, evolve. What is the next evolution? And let's stick because both of our world is on the hotel side. What is that next phase of luxury within the hotel segment? Like what do you think is going to be the new shiny toy that people are all, clamoring around and trying to get their hands on or trying to execute in a certain way? Are we going back to fine dining restaurants? Are we going to tasting menus? Is it going to stick with more of, I think of, I was just at Ritz Carlton Grand Lakes and, it was game changer when Highball and Harvest was put in, right? Which was outside the box of what Ritz Carlton had done at that point, which is a little bit more of that casual luxury. What is the next evolution in the luxury space in your opinion?
so I think I go back to what I said earlier about the word luxury being stretched.
Mhm.
I think the commodity luxury that we're seeing um, is really it's exactly that. It's commodity luxury, right? So, well, like it, don't like it, whatever you want to say to it. The reality is, in today's world, true luxury. Again, we go back to rare, hard to obtain, etc., etc. True luxury, in my opinion, can't be delivered in a size bigger than roughly around 100 rooms in a labor market that allows me to deliver luxury. Meaning, if I have to deliver luxury in its true sense of service, in its true sense of everything, there is a number game at play here that we won't be able to deliver luxury in a 300-room hotel where our labor model runs on one employee per room. It won't work, right? It's just physically not possible. So I think you will see, and we get to the culinary side in a second, but from a hotel perspective, what you're seeing already, Ritz-Carlton Reserve, right? You're seeing the successes of One and Only. You're seeing the successes of other brands. Aman has been playing in that area for a long time, right? 30, 40, 50 villas, that's it. And then deliver what the guest wants, when the guest wants, where the guest wants. That, I think, is becoming more and more true luxury for the real wealth client guests that are out there, where they can switch off, where they can relax, where everybody is just doing stuff at when they want it, how they want it, etc. Right?
So let me ask
So I
you
think
something
that's
on that because I'm glad you said that, and I'm very curious because originally when we talked about the Ritz Carlton brand, it was lower guest room count, was originally kind of the mindset, and then owners that were getting involved wanted to, oh my
yeah,
God, if I can get a little, I want more, right? That's always the thing.
higher.
How do I get more money? Well, if I get more money, I put more guest rooms. And I remember when I opened Grand Lakes, it was 584 guest rooms. It was the biggest
Yeah, and it was
time.
the biggest outside of Singapore, was the biggest hotel that ever opened.
Yeah, right? So and I looked at that and I go, how much you just said that we need to continue to see those numbers come down to deliver the experience the guest is really looking for
Yeah,
in that luxury space. Yet the owners are saying, well, wait a second. A lot of these owners, I want to see dollars. I want to see dollars. And there's almost a disconnect between some of the owners. And I think we find that more, I think, in the West, of understanding luxury
yes,
and owning a
yes.
luxury brand versus a non-luxury brand.
And I think this is where I was sort of going with this, right? So luxury hotels, which brands do we consider true luxury, and which are more in the stretch of the word of luxury? So if we look back in history, and I've been around 43 years, so in the industry, and I have a theory, and this is purely based on my observation, not on any facts or figures. But if you look back in the 50s and the 60s, who were the luxury hotel companies? It was Sheraton, was the first luxury hotel company globally. That then became commoditized as a company as it was growing and extending its reach over a certain amount of hotels. Then Hilton took over. Hilton International took over, right? Hilton International grew over 100 hotels. Hilton International, Tokyo, Hilton International, Hong Kong were world-class luxury hotels for many, many years and considered to be the best of the best in the world. And that delivered incredible food, incredible service, incredible product. And they were sort of the pioneers. Then Hilton sort of went away from the luxury space, right? Then Interconti took over for a short while, and then they went away. And then Ritz Carlton in the 80s started to appear, right? Four Seasons started to appear. And a couple of other companies that are out there today still appeared. Some of them stayed true to what they wanted to be and stayed true to it at the detriment of development, right? So if you look at Peninsula today still has only 9 hotels, right? So, and they stay true to their core mission and vision of that organization. And my theory has always been, if you grow a hotel company over 100 hotels, your leadership structure will have to change because you will have to manage the business differently. But by doing that, you're going against a control of a business, right? So if we look at, let's go Ritz-Carlton specific within the Marriott context. Ritz-Carlton, when it was a pyramid organization on its own, LLC, running it with a president, CEO, COO, leadership at every operational level, it ran very, very differently than it runs today in a matrix organization, right? Better or worse, to be debated by the higher powers. But I think the difference is that you can no longer control every project and every property as you could control it previously, and have the relationship with, from the ownership to the operating team, being connected as closely with the overarching vision and mission, right? So the challenge really becomes for any organization, when you get to 100 hotels, ballpark, right? Might be 120, might be 130, might be 110, might be 90, who knows? The dynamics change.
Yeah.
And because of the business, the way the business is conducted and the change in dynamics, some of this influences the end result, right?
Yeah.
And in today's world, I think you sort of said it earlier, I think the ownership involvement has completely changed. And again, there's reasons for all of this, right? So any stock market listed company, be it Marriott, be it Hilton, be it Hyatt, be it whatever the brands are, have to show to Wall Street value and growth, right? Very simple. By having to show value and growth consistently over a long period of time to make sure that the stocks are delivering, each of the brands in the portfolio is looked upon as how can we grow that brand? How can we grow that 250 room Ritz-Carlton to a 500 room Ritz-Carlton to make it more attractive to the owner, et cetera, right? Because we need to show this growth to deliver to Wall Street. And by doing that, you are almost at the will of the owner and saying, hey, I want to give you my business, but you need to do this for me, or you need to give me this exception, or you need to give me, I'm not going to spend, I don't know, whatever the number is, 550,000 a key on this project. I'm only going to spend 500. And then you as a management company have to say, okay, I can live with that.
Yeah.
Right? We'll make some compromises here or there. The problem is once the compromises get from 550,000 to 350,000 and you're changing the product, that's a whole other
No,
conversation.
there's been a
right?
shift in power.
There's a shift in power. And I think every company struggles with that. Whatever the international companies are, they all struggle with that. And then later on, trying to figure out how do you protect the brand integrity, or how to keep the brand integrity, and how do you make sure that you still deliver against those promises that you made to the guest, and then make sure the owner is happy, make sure flow through is right, making sure that all the matrices are being met, right? And that's why it becomes interesting and challenging, and sometimes to the point where you lose all your hair, right? sometimes there is success, right? Depending on who you're dealing with. So, and I think today, and there are some owners, and this is the other thing, right? In the West, and that's the biggest difference I have seen over my 10 years in corporate is, if an owner is personally invested in a property because it's his or hers project, it's very different. It's a very different motivation for them to do what they think is the right thing to do versus a VC company trying to flip an asset in 2 years.
Yeah.
Right? The motivation is a very different motivation. And therefore, the ask to the management company is a very different ask. And that's what obviously no guest will ever understand. That neither should they, right? But that's hotel companies will figure out how to make that transition work for the guest. But that's the biggest difference, right? Who's your investor? Who are you dealing with from the investor side?
Yeah.
Are they long-term owners, or are there organizations that look for short-term investments, asset or maximization, and then flipping?
Yeah.
And I've walked out of meetings with owners that were only interested in flipping to the detriment of the organization or the detriment of the operation.
Yeah, you got to protect the brand.
You try, right? But I've walked out of meetings where it was very clear not on their agenda.
Yeah.
So,
what do you think as we are getting to the tail end of this conversation? I think we can do this probably once a month, you and I, and just continue conversations for the next 5 years.
Plenty topics.
For you, your company on the design side, what's that project that you're most excited about? And where are you going right now with the company?
Yeah, so we never answered the food section of that last question, but that's okay. We can do it another time.
You're right. We didn't get to the food piece. I was so focused on the hotel side.
but we can get to the food. We're just going to talk about food another day. I think so. The most exciting thing is so doing stuff that you don't know anything about or little about, and being exposed to something completely new and different. So the most exciting project I'm working on is a 1,800 room, 5-star, all-inclusive product in Mexico by an independent owner without a brand affiliation.
Wow.
And the ownership group came to me and said, we need your guidance as to what type of food should we serve? What type of concept should we have? And then you tell us how to build the kitchens and the bars to support this, and give more generic advice around food and beverage, and then tell us what we should buy for OSNE to deliver against this. And so first of all, I've never done an 1,800 room hotel. I've never even looked at one other than as a guest in one or two in the world, right? Because there aren't many that are that big, except in Vegas.
Yeah.
So, but this is not Vegas. This is Mexico. Very different, right? So when we started working on that project, I sort of immersed myself in the larger all-inclusive world for a couple of weeks and visited those places and was surprised that some of them do a really good job. Because I always thought all-inclusive is just crap, right? That was sort of my vision, right? And the reality was that it wasn't, and some of them doing a tremendous job, and within limits, sure, right? But then get your head around these numbers, and then get your head around distribution and how to calculate. So the ask was no buffet. So 4,500, 5,000 guests, breakfast, no buffet. So I said to the gentleman, I said, I need to lock myself in a quiet space for like a day to think about how this might work. Right?
Yeah.
So we came up with sort of a market concept that is very similar to Wicked Spoon in Vegas, from a conceptual idea, right? So, and I can't wait for this thing to open and see what I got right and what I didn't get right. So, because I can theoretically tell you I think it's going to work great, but until this thing actually opens its doors and
Yeah.
has the first day with 4,000 guests and they're all trying to find food, we'll see. I'll be there looking at it. So I can't wait. This is really exciting because this is so different and so new and you got to really think, right? Speed of service, turnover, turn tables.
Yeah.
There's so many layers of this thing that you got to keep. Ice. Just think about ice.
I do often.
Ice distribution. Yeah, but ice distribution. How do you do this? Right?
I tell you, it's I'm excited for you because I know there's so many of the hotel groups that are now starting to play into this space and they're pushing hard into the all-inclusive
Yeah.
spaces. And so to see you doing it at a different level, that's going to push the envelope and change the norm of what we expect to see in those. It's cool that I get to have a front row seat next to you to see you kind of change, hopefully
we'll see that.
change the industry.
Maybe not change the industry, but change the point of view. I think really it's a point of view, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm doing another project right now, helping people. I said, you've got all the stuff, you're just not doing it right. So I said, so what are the few things you need to do to just change the conversation? Because all you need to do is change the point of view. If you have a ingredient, it depends how you cook the ingredient, right?
Yeah.
It's not. You can cook it shittily or you can cook it nicely.
So
It takes the same amount of time.
so funny you say that. We actually did a project, I guess it was last year, in Europe. I'll leave it at that to keep it as vague as possible. And they had
I know where.
they had a product, they had a physical product that was one of the best I had seen, in how it was designed and in theory what they wanted to do. When we got on property, what they were trying to execute was still in the exact same point of view that they've always done,
Yeah.
always had for the past 50
Right.
years. And they could not change the mindset to say, wait a second, change the way you're looking at this because the product you have is absolutely unbelievable. But how
Yeah.
you're trying to execute it is you're trying to pull it back into what it's always been versus pushing ahead to what it could be. And so,
And I think that I've encountered a lot. I even encountered that a lot in my previous role,
yeah,
where you walked into a hotel and you say, well, have you looked at it in a different perspective? And they were, no, but we always have done it that way. It was always this thing I would like to choke people, right? So we've always done it this way. It doesn't mean that's the right thing
yeah,
today, or maybe it wasn't even the right thing to do when you started this. Or sometimes it's the opposite. I said, let me look at what I remember. Ritz Carlton Sanya, the pool and beach operation was a disaster. And we went in there and we looked and said, just show me what it or how did it open? What was, the opening menu, the opening? So just go back to this, because whoever did this actually thought this stuff through. Just do what they were supposed to be doing in the beginning, right?
Yep.
But you've added so much stuff that wasn't relevant anymore. So sometimes you have to go back to the original intent, and you find that it probably was better than what you're doing today.
Yeah, true. Well, man, I'm gonna commit to, I think, once a month, you and I scheduling a call, because I
Sure.
have 30 more things for us to talk about. But I can't thank you enough for letting us steal a little bit of your time.
No, it's an absolute pleasure, and happy to do it whenever you want to.
So if
Well, we can talk about story next time.
I know, well, actually, we're gonna the next one we will dedicate the entire time
Sure.
only talking about food. I have a ton of
All right.
questions around
Good.
that, so I have segments. This is segment one, hotel, and then next one we'll go
Okay.
into food, and then I'd love, actually, I want to do one after that to talk about bar, because I'd love to get your perspective from a chef's view
Absolutely.
on the beverage piece. So
Yeah.
I promise to everyone that that's going to happen here shortly. So if people are looking for you, how can they find you?
Very simple, on the hkb-designs.com website. Insta, Rainer Zinngrebe. That's about it. Or just, Google.
Google.
You'll find me. You'll find me.
Agreed.
Google.com.
You
You'll
will.
find me.
Well, I thank you so much, my friend. Thanks for everyone that's tuned in today. If you're looking for us, at Chris Adams _ EAG, or ellisadamsgroup.com, either one. We have more fun stuff coming up. We're going to be with Chef Reiner multiple times. So be on the lookout for that. And we'll see everyone next week.